Welcome back to Detroit Next. I'm really glad that you have joined us. In the modern history of Detroit, there are two people who have gone from being the president of our city council to being mayor. One of them is Louis Mariani, who became mayor after Mayor Albert Cobo died. The other is sitting right here next to me. Kenneth Cockrel became the mayor of the city of Detroit in 2009 after former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick had to resign. We want to talk to Ken about the experience he has as a Detroiter, as a member of the city council, and then as mayor. It's such an unusual set of experiences. So let's just go right back to that moment. Let's talk about the day that you walked into KMAC and were the mayor of Detroit, whereas the day before or the week before, you had been the president of the city council. What kind of things surprised you about that, and what kind of challenges did you encounter?
Yeah. Well, first off, I mean, the one question that people used to always ask me about was it a big surprise? Yeah. And obviously it wasn't.
Yeah. Well,
because if you're looking at, I don't know if people necessarily remember a lot of the dynamics that were at play, but I mean, I think I was at a point where, for want of a better term, my kitchen table cabinet and a lot of the staff and people around me kind of knew at some point you're probably just going to be a piece of paper away from becoming the next mayor of the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
So it was just a question more so of when rather than if. So from that standpoint, I had a little bit of time to prepare, and to get ready, because it was coming. It's just you don't know exactly when it was going to come. Having said that, though, the transition, it was challenging because obviously it wasn't a typical transition. Typically, when somebody becomes mayor, or for that matter, any executive, whether it's county executive, whether it's governor, whether it's president of the United States, you typically have a transition period of essentially November, December to get ready. In this case, it was more like your transition period is basically a couple of days, maybe a week or so, to go ahead and make that switch. So it required a really kind of galvanizing and moving very quickly to get certain things set up and to prepare for it. But ultimately was able to do it under very unusual circumstances.
Yeah. What were some of the immediate differences that you noticed between that legislative branch and leading that legislative branch, and then leading the entire city and city government?
Well, it's like the volume of everything gets turned up to 11, and the scope of everything that you have to deal with all of a sudden increases dramatically, because you go from, like, when you're a council member, for example, I'm not sure what it's like now, but back then, looking at the typical size of the average council member's budget, if you're a rank and file council member, you probably have a budget of anywhere from maybe 4 to 5, it gives you the ability to maybe hire anywhere from 4 to 5 people.
Yeah.
Council president, by virtue of enhanced responsibilities, you have a larger budget, and you also have oversight authority over a number of other city council staff divisions at that time. So I basically was responsible probably for maybe about 7 direct staff who worked for me. And then in total, counting 3 other staff divisions, probably about 35 people.
Wow.
So basically went from managing a staff of 35 people to probably about 3,400, in the space of just a couple of days. So that's the biggest difference, because now you're responsible for ultimately day-to-day management and operations of entire city government.
Right. Yeah. Right. The city was not in great shape when you got to be the mayor. You had this political crisis that had been, I think, distracting people for a year or more at that point. And I said it was 2009. It was actually 2008 when you became the mayor.
Correct.
And then we had like 3 elections.
4. Totally.
Was it 4?
For me, it was 4. Exactly.
Yeah. But talk about that early time in office and what you discovered about what was working, what wasn't, and what the opportunity was as mayor to do much about it.
Right. Well, it wasn't a surprise, because even before taking office, we knew that the city's finances were challenged, and because this was pre-bankruptcy, so it was before the emergency manager came in, and you later on had things like the grand bargain, which led to a dramatic restructuring of the city's finances and elimination of a lot of that debt. This was before any of that, so it was like you had this tremendous weight kind of pressing down. It did present an opportunity because while it was a crisis, what's the old saying, and I can't remember who coined it. I think it's generally attributed to Winston Churchill, but I don't think he actually said it. But the saying is never waste a crisis.
Right.
So from that standpoint, it presented an opportunity to say, okay, what can we do to rethink city government, how it looks, how it operates, and how it delivers basic services.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you think about the time that you had in office, what are the things that you felt like you were able to say, all right, I can fix that, even if it's a small thing?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you couldn't have fixed the entire thing in the time you had. But what are some of the things that you would point to that you said, look, we actually took care of that?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the basic things that we did, I brought in a new police chief, and we actually created an arrangement with the Detroit Public Schools Police Department, where we said, we're going to coordinate services more effectively in order to make sure that when there's issues in and around schools, or actually if there's, for example, a problem within a school, the Detroit Police Department and the Detroit Public Schools Police Department, they're on the same wavelength. They're talking, and they can coordinate a response if necessary.
Yeah.
That was something that we were able to do, pretty quickly. And pretty easily.
Okay, so let's talk now in the city about, it's many, many years later. We're in another election cycle. We have two members of the city council who say they want to be mayor. We also have a former city council person, Santil Jenkins. She was also city council president at a time, who want to do it. What would you say to those candidates in particular about what they need to be prepared for, and what from the work that they're doing now kind of translates over into being effective in the mayor's office?
I would say the big thing to prepare for, because even though I had served in city government for over a decade before I became mayor, but when I became mayor, the one thing that even I wasn't quite ready for is the extent to which every day can hit you with something completely unexpected. So that's the thing I think anybody that's going to be mayor needs to be prepared for. You can have a sense of what your day is going to look like just based on your calendar and what you have on it. But the reality is something may come up that's going to force you to completely recalibrate and do something different. I can remember, for example, one Saturday morning where when I was mayor and I got the phone call that there was a fire on the east side, DFD had responded. One of the firefighters that was on the scene was fighting the fire, actually fell through the roof, was seriously injured, and was taken to the hospital. This is a Saturday morning. I'm thinking it's going to be a fairly light day for me. No, you got to get up 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, go to Detroit Receiving Hospital, because when you get those calls, it is very often important for the mayor to be on site, to be there, to respond, to be there to meet with the family, to deal with that, to deal with other firefighters. Similarly, if it's a police officer that maybe gets involved in a police-involved shooting and is injured, you're going to have to, whatever you had on your calendar, that all is going to have to be set aside. You need to go deal with that. Or it could be something like, for example, maybe you find out that the city's bond rating just got downgraded.
Sure.
So now...
That used to happen a lot.
So now you need to be in a position to coordinate with your public relations team and with the city's communications team to respond to that, because you're going to be getting questions, not just from local media, but even national media as well. So I would say the thing that they have to be prepared for and be ready for is to understand that whatever you think your day looks like from day to day, it could change on a dime, and you have to be prepared to respond to it.
How much from the experience you had on city council did you feel like gave you an advantage in trying to get the city council to do what you needed as mayor? I mean, you knew how council worked, and you knew how the relationship between the two would work in the ideal. Did that give you a leg up, an advantage when you were in the mayor's role?
It was an advantage, but that didn't always work, because the reality is, there's two things you don't get to choose in life. You don't get to choose your family, and if you're an elected official, you don't get to choose the other elected officials that you serve with. And sometimes some of those people, they may have different priorities. They may have a personal beef with you or an axe to grind, and they tend to bring that stuff actually to the table when they do. So yes, it was helpful sometimes, because it's like, the process, the system, and the personality. So you kind of can use that to your advantage in terms of knowing what buttons to push and what buttons to avoid. But it doesn't always work in your favor.
Yeah. What was the relationship that you had with first Mayor Kilpatrick, who was mayor while you were president of the city council? And then I'm going to have you remind me, who was president of the city council once you left to be mayor? Was it Santil?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
That's how she became.
Well, actually, so let me take you back even a little further than that, because see, when I first got elected to the Detroit City Council was back in 1997.
Right.
So I took office in January of 1998. That was also during former Mayor Dennis Archer's second term.
Right. Yeah.
So he was actually the first mayor that I served with. Right. And Archer and I always had a good relationship with. I always had a good relationship with him. Didn't always agree with everything he was doing. Voted against his agenda sometimes. But generally, the way I approach things with Archer, which kind of set the tone for the future, is, if I think you're doing the right thing, I'm going to back you on it.
Yeah.
If I think you're doing the wrong thing on something, I'm not. And I may even criticize you publicly for it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the relationship I had with Kilpatrick when he came in, at least initially. Now, later on, when he got into a lot of his shenanigans, the quality of that relationship, I would say, eroded a bit.
Yeah.
But that was how I generally tried to deal with him. Same with Dave Bing also.
Right.
So in total.
Right, because after you were mayor, you went back to council.
I went back to council, and
Dave Bing was mayor.
And Dave Bing came in. So in total, it's 3 mayors that I actually served with. Santil initially became council president.
Right.
But that, I think, was only after former council president Charles Pugh had to step down.
Had to leave.
Because of his own scandal.
Right.
And that was how Santil later on became council president.
Okay. And how did that relationship work? That you having been council president, then being mayor, having the former relationship with the council president. That's something that Mary Sheffield, who's the current president running for mayor, might have to face.
Yeah. To be honest, I kind of like, after having been, I started out the first term on council, I was just a rank and file council member. And then later on, when I ran again, came in as the second highest voter on council, which at that time was still elected from an at-large system. Right. So consequently, I became council pro tem under then Mary Ann Mahaffey.
So the system then was the highest vote getter.
Right. Highest vote getter becomes council president. Second highest vote getter becomes council president pro tem. So I served as council president pro tem under Mary Ann Mahaffey during my second term, because she was the president then. When I ran the third time, I was the highest vote getter. Right. And that's when I became council president.
Yeah.
In my fourth term on council, that's when Pugh was the highest vote getter. I went back to being a rank and file councilman, but honestly, I kind of liked it, to some extent, and actually sort of tried to support Pugh during his transition, because when he came on, he was not only a first-time council president, he was a first-time council member.
Right.
So he was still learning city government.
Right.
So I tried to give him whatever advice and counsel I could give him that I thought would be helpful in making that transition.
Yeah. What do you make of the city now, its challenges? Things look very different in Detroit now than they did then, but there's some problems that have crossed over and stayed with us. What do you make of what we're facing in terms of the choices that we have? And if you had to sort of crystal ball what the next mayor will face in terms of those challenges, what does that look like?
I think it's really probably the equity issue.
Yeah.
Because it's still something that comes up. I mean, my perspective on this is interesting because I worked in city government at a time where the view of the city of Detroit was very, very negative.
Yes.
It was the whole last person out of Detroit, turn out the lights. People would always hold up the city of Detroit as the poster child for urban dysfunction.
Yes.
Now the narrative is kind of completely flipped on its head.
Mm-hmm.
And the narrative now is kind of like, oh, Detroit's back.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit's the poster child for how you can take a dysfunctional city and stage a comeback. But the reality is both of those are extreme positions that are not true.
Right.
The real truth is, if you look at those extremes, the one here and the other here, the truth is really more in the middle. And that's that Detroit is doing a lot better, but it still has some substantial issues.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time to this day, even though people talk about all the great things that are happening in Detroit, all too often when you get into the details of what they're seeing and what they're talking about, they tend to kind of be centered in a 7.2 square mile area of the city.
Downtown, Midtown.
Yeah, downtown, Midtown, Corktown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, though we're now seeing a lot of that spilling out more into the neighborhoods, you still have to consider the fact that this is a city of, I think in total square mileage, it's somewhere about 136 square miles, something like that. You have large swaths of the city where a lot of that progress and that development has not even begun to touch it.
Yeah.
So that remains an issue. And there's still also questions about how much of the development that is being done, how much of the contract work that is being done, for example, by firms who are actually building a lot of this stuff. You still have the question of, okay, but how much of that is actually flowing to Detroiters?
Right.
How much of that is actually flowing to Detroit-based and Detroit headquartered businesses? How many of that work is actually being done by people who look like you and me?
Right.
That's still an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the Mayor Duggan says, go around the city. He says, go to every neighborhood and you can see some measure of this progress taking place. Do you not agree with that, or do you think it's just not enough in some of those places?
I think it's not enough in some areas, and I don't think that's. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. I think it's not through lack of trying on his part.
Yeah.
Because even after I left city government, I had an opportunity for a while when I was at the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation running the Detroit Future City program to work directly with Mayor Duggan and to work with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation and the city's planning department. So I've seen some of the people that he brought in. And I think there really has been and continues to be a very sincere commitment to trying to crack the code on how do you take a lot of what we see happening in some of these areas and use it as a way to catalyze more development in some of these hard to reach places. I just think they haven't quite cracked the code on it yet. It's a tough challenge, and it's now going to be a challenge that I think will be one of the top issues that a new mayor will have to face.
So if you had a list that you could leave on the new mayor's desk, top three buttons you could push or levers you could pull to really make a difference with those disparities, that gap.
Yeah.
What would you say is most within the mayor's grasp? What are the things you can move easier than other stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it, I think, is stuff that Duggan has actually done a pretty fabulous job on, and that's basic city service delivery, which I think pretty much across the board, there's really no doubt that things from streetlights being on to police response time to ambulance response time to number of vacant buildings that are in need of demolition actually coming down in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
I think if you look at those metrics, it's been a huge success. I think the key is to continue to do that and to not lose momentum. The equity piece, which I just talked about, I think that's huge as well.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something that I think a new mayor is going to have to continue to focus on.
What do they do though for that? Like, how do you fix that problem? It's not just a Detroit problem. It's
the equity piece or the city service piece?
The equity piece.
Yeah. If I knew the answer to that,
I'd be running for mayor again.
No, I would probably be making a ton of money someplace else in the private sector. Right? I think a big part of it though is to continue to, I think, try to empower people who have things that they want to do, who have development ideas, who maybe don't have the access to capital.
Yeah, sure.
It's to try to create new vehicles and support existing vehicles to help them get the capital that they need to make a development happen.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it.
What about city council? I mean, you served on city council much longer than you were mayor. What would you say to the many people who now say, "Hey, I want to do that. I want to represent my fellow Detroiters in that legislative branch"?
I would say the key thing is read the city charter.
Yeah.
Read it and understand it, because the thing that it used to always, sometimes I found it funny, particularly like in an election year when I would be out there as a candidate seeking reelection to city council. You go to a lot of these candidate forums and you see and hear your fellow candidates making promises about what they would do if they got elected. And kind of 9 times out of 10, it was stuff that they really,
you actually can't do that.
You can't do that. You wouldn't have the power to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I remember one in particular, one of the council members that was saying that, well, not one of the council members, but it was a candidate for council who was saying, well, the thing that I would do is I would get with DTE and I would make sure that they open up community service centers in all areas of the city of Detroit where people can actually go and pay their bills. And it's like, you can't force DTE to do that.
It's not really when you're
it's not, you don't.
Good idea, but
you don't have the power to do that.
Yeah.
You can't force or compel them to do that.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you can encourage them or incentivize them to do it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if they want to do a community service center, they're going to put it where they want to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the change in city council? When you were a member, as you say, it was all at large, and then we changed the city charter radically and created this two-tiered system, really, where there are 2 at-large council members, and then everyone else is elected by district. I wonder what you make of that difference and what difference it's had on the city. Now that this is, I think, the 4th election we'll have under those new, or maybe the 3rd, under that new system. Is it changing things appreciably? Is it changing things in the way that we might have imagined that they would have changed when we made that charter revision?
Yeah, it's funny because I know that you and I were actually talking about this a little bit before the camera started to roll.
Yeah.
I don't know that it has had the desired impact.
Yeah.
Because I think the desired impact at the time when people were pushing for it and they wanted to see it happen was they wanted to know that if they had a neighborhood problem, that their council member,
someone to go to.
Yeah, that it would be, that if they live in whatever district, that the council person from that district would be the person that they would be able to go to get that problem addressed. And I don't know that it's really had that impact. Part of it is because, as you were saying, that Mayor Duggan, to his credit, and I think very shrewdly, kind of created this own system where he created what used to be called the neighborhood city halls.
Right.
He recognized it with a district system. The thing to do is to not have a neighborhood city hall, but rather to have basically try to align his own staff according to those council districts and have these district managers. And they, in a way, have kind of stepped up to be the point person for a lot of these service delivery concerns or questions or problems. But in a way, I think that's potentially good because if they're running point on that, which the reality is they really ought to, then I think it frees council up to focus on what its real job is, which is to be the legislative branch for the city of Detroit. Making policy, passing legislation, writing and passing ordinances which are going to address problems in the city of Detroit or improve conditions in the city. Because that is council's real focus. It's to write and pass legislation, and it's to approve the budget.
Yeah.
And to approve contracts above a certain dollar amount.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other goals of that change was to, I guess, bring council members closer to citizens. People felt like, just the contact even between citizens and council members was kind of strange because who represents me there?
Right.
Do you feel like that is better now that we have these district representatives? Are they more representative, for instance, of kind of areas of the city and neighborhoods in a way that Detroiters are seeing a benefit from?
I actually do think it's better, but I think a lot of that is going to depend on the individual councilman.
Well, sure.
I mean, and that's because one of the things I used to always say when the district system was being discussed is, at the end of the day, it's not so much how you elect, it's about who you elect.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reality is if you elect a clown, whether you're electing that clown from an at-large system or electing that clown from a district, there's still going to be a clown.
Right.
Now, to bring it up to date today, I do know that there are some I think of James Tate, Councilmember James Tate, who I served with. Mm-hmm. He has been incredibly diligent at being responsive to his district constituency. He does regular, ongoing meetings. Sometimes these are big kind of structured town halls.
Yeah.
Other times it's just a question of saying, I'm going to be doing office hours at this coffee shop for 2 hours on this date. Just come by. We'll have coffee. If you got something you want to talk to me about, I'll be there. So I think you've got some council members like him who have used the system in a way I think they've leaned into it and they've used the system the way it ought to be used, which is to say, I'm your district council member. You can come and talk to me and you can come and see me.
Yeah. Last question. You were a mayor of the city for a time. You were a longtime city council member. I'm really curious. I'm not asking you to pick a winner or a candidate, but what is it that you're waiting to hear or see in the mayor's race that will make you decide this is the person? This is the person for this time to lead the city forward.
Yeah. It's a great question because I'll be honest in saying I've been looking at the candidates. I've even spoken with a number of mayoral candidates. Mm-hmm. I personally have not made up my mind who I'm going to vote for as of yet. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the reason why is because I'm kind of still waiting to
see. I think a lot of people are in that space. I want to see more. I want to hear more.
Yeah. For me, I guess I want to see a plan that recognizes that the current mayor has really done overall a fabulous job. Mm-hmm. But how are you not only going to build on that so that we don't lose momentum? How are you going to put your own stamp on city government?
Yeah.
What are you going to do to, continue the positive momentum, but also refashion or reshape the city of Detroit, or at least Detroit government in your image? I'm not hearing that yet.
Yeah. I think as we get more into the campaign and they have more opportunities to talk with each other and with citizens, I'm hopeful that comes out. But I think a lot of people are in that space right now where they haven't quite heard that.
Yeah.
What is it that you want to do?
And the reality is I think it's probably going to come down to getting through the primary.
Yeah.
So that we've got two people left standing at that point. And then, then we're going to know. I mean, my personal take, looking at how the field has developed.
So Mayor Duggan has changed the scope and the scale, really, of the executive branch to some degree. Not beyond what the charter allows, but he's doing things that other mayors haven't chosen to do, and expanded departments or added departments to do that. What should the next mayor be thinking about in terms of sustaining that from a budget standpoint, but also their own plans to maybe do things differently and come up with things that city government can be doing that it wasn't doing before?
It's a great question. I don't, unfortunately, since I myself have now been out of city government now for well over 10 years, it's probably closer to like 12, 13 since I've been gone. So I don't 100% have a handle on certain new departments or new positions that have been created.
Yeah.
So I'm not really in a position to speak in detail about how city government has expanded from, say, where it was when I was there. I do know that there are like some positions where I did kind of look at it and like, what? That's weird.
What is that?
Yeah, like I know he created at one point, I don't know if it's still around, like a chief storyteller position.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell's that? You know? Another one was that he created a demolition department. Now, previously, the functions of demolition, when you're talking about maybe demolishing vacant houses or even larger buildings, those actually used to be housed in a pre-existing department, which was the Buildings and Safety Engineering Department.
Yeah.
So did you need to spin that off and maybe make it its own department? I don't know that needed to be done.
Yeah.
It seems to have worked fairly well. So I don't have a big issue or problem with it. But I suppose one could make an argument that if a new mayor's coming in and they want to maybe take a look at producing some efficiencies, maybe some of those departments you look at reconsolidating.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you look at maybe merging certain things and maybe eliminating certain positions that are unnecessary. I would not suggest that any new mayor come in, you know, to look at what's happened in the federal government recently with Elon Musk and Doge. I think it would be a disaster for a new mayor to come in and say, well, we're just going to do across the board cuts and, you know, because we've seen the ripple effect of that,
the consequences
on everything when you come in with a chainsaw, literally, which is what they did in Washington. We've seen the ripple effect and the damage that can be done when you come in with a chainsaw as opposed to a scalpel. So I would say, any new mayor wants to come in, you want to take a look at maybe producing some efficiencies and saving money. By all means, it makes sense, but be very careful about how you do it.
Yeah, but well, you're going to have to deal with drops in revenue for sure, right? The amount of money that came from the federal government over the last 4 to 6 to 8 years is just incredible, and the money that you can't necessarily count on tax receipts going up indefinitely. I mean, they've gone up a lot,
right?
That could plateau or go back down. So they're going to have to make some tough financial decisions, I think.
Your point about money coming from the federal government, that's a key one because we benefited, you know, from the
hugely
for the past 4 years. We benefited tremendously from having a president in the White House who was very friendly to cities like Detroit.
Yeah.
You had programs like the IRA and other federal funding programs. The future of those programs is now in doubt.
Right.
I mean, the federal government, to my knowledge, is still not quite finalized what they want to do with the IRA and some of these other programs. But the latest thing that I'm hearing is that some of these programs where like the funding was going to be in place to 2032, that sunset date is probably going to be moved up to maybe 2028.
Yeah.
I've even heard talk of if certain dollars have not already been expended or if they're not already encumbered, that there's talk of maybe clawing back and taking that money.
Yeah.
So, and it's frustrating because here we are now, we're almost 6 months into this administration, but a lot of these questions still haven't been answered. So it goes back to your point, which is that we can't rely on the White House or Washington, D.C. For federal largesse anymore. It's not going to happen. It's looking pretty clear that it's probably going to come down to, I think, current council president Mary Sheffield and Pastor Solomon Kinloch.
Yeah, I feel like those are the two.
I think those are going to be the two. Because, I mean, Kinloch is coming on strong. He's
moved way up in the polls. Not that we get a lot of them, but
he's moved way up in the polls. And just kind of looking at, you know, his congregation is massive. He says it's 40,000. Maybe those numbers are exaggerated, but let's say it's just half that.
Yeah.
Say it's 20,000. If every single one of those people that's a member of his congregation lives in the city of Detroit, votes for him.
Live outside the city.
Yeah, a lot of them do. But, I mean, that's kind of true of most churches these days.
That's right. But he's got members who are voters, no question.
Right. And more importantly, if those people not only vote for him, but if they also remember that old shampoo commercial from when we were kids, I told 2 friends and they told 2 friends and so on and so on. Yeah. So if they're out there doing that, it's kind of hard to envision a scenario where he does not make the primary along with Council President Sheffield. So that's my prediction is it's probably going to come down to those two. And I think it's depending on where they finish, it could be a real fight.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to have you come back in the fall for the general.
Yeah.
And talk about what happened. All right. Always great to see you.
Yeah. Always good to be seen. Better to be seen than viewed, right?
That's right. That's right. We'll be back with more Detroit Next.
Detroit Next is a community-led project from Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different, which means that we can't do this work without you. We need your support. If you have a question or a comment and want to participate in this process throughout the year, give us a call. We have a phone line set up at 313-284-6407. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the podcast. If you like what we're doing, head to BridgeDetroit.com and subscribe to our newsletters. All of that content, again, is free, no paywalls for anybody. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. Head to our YouTube channel to get full episodes and interviews along with extra content throughout the year. You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year long, so stay with us. Follow Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different on your favorite social media platforms and take this ride with us. Thanks.